Welcome to the Pure Passion Podcast with Dr. David Kyle Foster. This podcast and our many other resources are made possible by our donors. Please support this ministry by going to our website, masteringlife.org.
Welcome to Pure Passion. I'm your host, David Kyle Foster. I'm so glad you came to visit with us today. We have a guest from New Zealand. Her name is Briar Whitehead, and she has written one of the most marvelous books on sexual brokenness and the healing of the sex addict and the homosexual. There's lots in it. It's packed full. And she's a journalist by trade, so it's just a wonderful, quick read, and just highly recommend it to you. It's called Craving for Love. You don't happen to have a copy that you can hold up, do you?
I do. This is what I call my working copy with all my sticky notes in there. Here it is.
Craving for Love, Relationship, Addiction, Homosexuality, and the God Who Heals. I highly recommend this book. It shows the commonality between all of these issues. As I said before on another program, sexual brokenness really isn't about sex. It's about root traumas and things like that, which apply over all kinds of issues, don't they? So welcome, Briar. How you doing?
How am I doing? Well, I'm overjoyed to see you, David.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you was about, 10 years ago, and just to see your smiling face makes my heart beam.
Yeah, the feeling is mutual. And I look at my face all the time, so that's why. No, I'm joking. Well, you say that behind addiction lies the story of our lives. Oh gosh, I love that statement. What happened to us and our reactions to what happened to us. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
That is a statement that comes out of a life dysfunctionally lived. And I think all of us are in that category.
To some degree.
Yes, to some degree. It's always the love of God that rescues us. And the particular hole I fell into came out of experiences in my life, my family, life in the family. I had a bad stutter when I was a child, and it completely derailed my social interactions. I had no social life as a teenager. I wanted to just end my life when I was about 20 years old. And I grew up with great deficits for love, for approval, for acceptance, to belong. I never felt I belonged in my family. And God rescued me about the age of 17. He came in the form of love. And I had a vision. I had a vision at the time, and I was in an enormous hole with slippery sides, and I could not get myself out, no matter how much I tried. And I saw this little vision. I saw this little speech bubble. Help me, God, help me. And this huge hand came down. And it just picked me up, and it took me right up and put me out on the top. And my life has been a journey into the love of God, and realizing that all the compensating behaviors that I developed that helped me understand homosexuality, even though I was not lesbian, I could just see how all the behaviors and relationships and that we connect to, all the addictive parts of our life, the obsessional parts of our life, have their roots in this breakdown in knowing love, knowing belonging, knowing home, knowing approval, knowing value. We don't have these things. We go on a search for substitutes.
Yeah. And you talk about various kinds of addiction, like relationship, friendship addiction, in addition to drugs and alcohol and sex.
Yeah, with guys, it tends to be sexualized, but guys go for things. mainly, or mastery of things, or maybe alcohol. Women will tend to go for relationships. They'll hook into their families. There'll be suffocating relationships in families, or just bad dynamics. They'll go for men. If you're a lesbian, you'll go for a woman, but it tends to be relational and entanglement. With guys, it's more to do with things and mastery and power and status and success. Anyway, yeah. So I understand all that, and the interesting thing is, Dave, when I started writing Craving for Love, it's really quite a story. But I remember almost drowning in the data when I was halfway through the book. I had traveled through the States. I've spoken to a lot of people who were changing their sexual orientation. I had so much material, and Neil was helping me on the scientific side. And
Neil is your husband.
I was drowning in all this data. And I remember coming out of my study where I was working and sort of shouting to God and saying, why do you want me to write this book? I'm drowning in this stuff. It was like I had this river going over my head, and I was coming up for air and then go under again. And Jesus suddenly appeared. Most unexpected.
Wow.
You don't always expect him to show up.
No.
On this occasion. He did. And he stood there right alongside me. And I remember this about him. His eyes were gray. I just remember his eyes were gray. And to me, gray sort of means kind of steely. I don't mean without love. I just mean a determination in a gray eye.
Yeah.
Blue eyes twinkle, but these eyes weren't twinkling.
Yeah.
But he was kind. And he just stood there. And I said to him, why do you want me to write this book? And you know what he said? He just simply said, because I want you to write this book.
Wow. The Lord showed me his eyes once. I had been reading in, I think, Revelation, where it talks about having eyes of fire.
Yeah.
And he showed me in a vision him sitting on a horse with eyes of fire. Well, prior to that moment, I had always thought, oh, that's scary. He's judging me. I don't want him to have eyes of fire. But suddenly the fire turned into love.
Yes.
And his fire was an intense love for me. So intense that it's beyond all experience here on earth.
Yes. Oh, yes. We were made to know his love for us.
Yeah.
We were made to live in it. We were made to be in love with God.
Yeah.
And if we don't know that, that's when we go on our search for our substitutes. That's when our sexuality gets messed up.
Yeah.
And we try and find our own answers, and all we do is hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
In the end. But God is the father of his kids.
Yeah.
And he's coming after us. That old poem, The Hound of Heaven?
Yeah.
It makes God look as though he's tracking us down like prey, but it's not. We are the object of his great desire and his great affection and his great love. And he's saying, come back to my arms, come back where I can wrap you around with my wraparound presence and protect you and love you and look after you and think about you all the time.
Yeah.
And care for you and bless you and give you my favor and open doors for you. He loves us. If we don't, anyway, he's my favorite topic of conversation.
Yeah, I could tell. So you have two quotes in the first part of your book I want to read so that we can jump off of them. The first one is from a book called Addiction and Grace by Gerald May. And he writes, our addictions become our idols. The objects of our addictions become our false gods. These are what we worship, what we attend to, where we give our time and energy. Addictions get in the way of God's love for us and our love for God. And then you write in your book, Craving for Love, we were made to love and desire God. But psychologically, addiction uses up desire. It is like a psychic malignancy, sucking our life energy into specific obsessions and compulsions, leaving less and less energy available for other people and other pursuits. Addiction has been called a counterfeit of religious presence. Addictions make an absence out of God's presence. We love the sense of his desire for us, of his nearness. Boy, that sort of sums it up, doesn't it? In terms of the love of God and how it transforms.
Yes, it does. If I could dip into my own history here, which helped me understand, put me on the inside of homosexuality and what was going on with same-sex attraction. Because of the deficits with my father, he was an absence, not a presence. He didn't relate with me very much at all. I had very, very few conversations with him that I can really remember. He was hard, and I ended up with this enormous consuming desire to be, but it was all sort of subconscious, to be the object of a man's love and affection.
Mm-hmm.
And they were always older men, men who were old enough to be my father.
Mm-hmm.
And if they showed me, if there was the slightest bit of love in their eyes or kindness in their manner, or if they thought I was special in some way, or they valued me, I would be hooked.
Mm-hmm.
And same as with a homosexual person, a gay person, you lock and key into one particular type and not another. And there's a mystery in that. There's a kind of a chemistry in that, but it connects into your family life a lot.
Yeah.
But I would find myself, it was almost like I heard this inner clunk, and I just knew that I had locked in to this person. And my life began to almost, I say, shrink down to the size of the person I could not do without.
Yeah. Well,
and it was not something I could do anything about. I couldn't by willpower. I had strong moral codes in place, etc. But I was totally sort of powerless in this. I had no way out.
I had a similar experience. Before I became a male prostitute, I was at the pier, in St. Petersburg, Florida, and just trying to find God, just going there to talk to him. And turned out it was a place where male prostitutes hung out, which I didn't even know they existed. I thought it was a drug place because people were coming over in cars and waving you over and stuff. So this guy comes up to me and he goes, "You're doing it wrong." And I said, "Doing what?" And he proceeds to teach me how to prostitute myself. I was just flabbergasted that anybody would think that I would do such a thing. And I'd come there to talk to God. So I got mad at God and I thought, okay, I'm just going to do this to show you how much I'm angry at you. So I got into the car of this guy, and he was an older guy, and I had a father wound. So I needed a father's love and affirmation, which I had not gotten. And I get into the car and he turns and looks at me and he goes, "You're beautiful."
Oh dear.
And I was trapped instantly because I'd never heard a father figure affirm me or tell me I was okay. And so I was willing to do, like you, just about anything with that guy because of the affirmation that I needed.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about self-hatred, which we're going to head into sex addiction here for a while. Sex addicts often have a lot of self-hatred, a river really of self-hatred in many cases. Since self-hatred exacerbates sexual addiction, how can we circumnavigate the tension between that self-hatred and the inconvenient truth that our addictions are idols in the sight of a holy God? I mean, if I'm being told we're in idolatry. I'm in idolatry because of my sex addiction, which I was also a sex addict. Then isn't that going to increase the self-hatred? I mean, how do you get around that conundrum?
The only way I can understand it and the way I experienced it was experiencing the love of God. God did not reject me. I rejected myself. I thought God rejected me. I lived with guilt that I could not beat this thing, and that it kept on seizing me and becoming very intense. And I would finish one and start another. So I felt bad about it all the time. And it was only when God reached into this wound to show me that he was not condemning me, he was not rejecting me, he understood why I did it. And again, I had an intense experience one day when I think I was just sitting at the table, and I might have been reading the book of Ezekiel, and it's this section where the prophet talks about Israel just sort of left in a field bleeding and dying, and God comes along and rescues her, takes her by the hand, and it talks about her reaching the stage where she's growing breasts and hair, and she's becoming beautiful, and he puts a bracelet on her, and he puts a necklace on her, and I tell you, Jesus showed up right at that point, and he looked at me as if he had eyes only for me. My teenage years were awful, but he looked at me and he said, "You have ravished my heart." There was no one in the world he was looking at but me, and he loved me with great tenderness, and he put a necklace around my neck, and he put a bracelet on my hand.
Gosh.
On my wrist.
Gosh.
And I was for days I was just overwhelmed with the love of Jesus Christ, my lover.
Yeah.
And
he promised to reveal himself to us, didn't he?
Well, this is the thing. I firmly believe that unless we encounter this God, he's a concept.
Yeah.
And life becomes full of moral obligations and expectations of others and our own expectations of ourselves. And he's saying, look at me. Give me your eyes. Give me your eyes. All I want you to do is love me. I am in love with you. I am totally poured out for you. I am totally committed to you. I've given myself for you. I want you so much. So when you realize that you're actually meeting that love, I think it's Satan's horrible trick to try and put his own character on the face of God.
Yes.
And say God is legalistic, God is distant, God is remote, God is critical, God is cruel. Look at all the pain in the world. He doesn't even care. That is a lie.
Yeah.
That is an awful lie. And the thing is, fall for it, because if we're not in the love of God, we sort of can't see it.
Yeah.
So he has to encounter us by dropping in and saying, "Hello, I am the God who loves you.
Yes.
These are my characteristics."
That makes the point that it's the healing comes from experiencing God and his love. It just automatically heals something. I've actually felt something inside, not even knowing what it was, being healed just in his presence.
Absolutely. I have a friend who had a bad addiction problem, and he was actually healed in a situation where a woman minister said, she said, I am a mother. I'm a mother in Israel. And there, it happened in a public setting, in a camp setting. If you want to receive a mother's hug from God Himself, come up, and I will hug you. And it's a sacrament. There's nothing soulish about this. This is a sacramental moment. And he went up. Nothing much happened, but he went back to his room, and he lay on the bed. And he said all of a sudden he had the sense that there was like a pump above his head, and it was pumping. And he said it was coming down. It circumvented his brain, his mind, because he was a critical thinker, and he thought, this is nuts. He said it went down, and it went into, he said, like psychological holes. He said, and I began to realize it was like mother's milk. And he had a history of where he wasn't mothered as a child. And so he got into addiction with women's breasts and everything else, looking for what he needed. And he found that for the next 3 months or more, whenever he got on his bed and lay on his bed, the pumping would start. And he said it would come in and fill up these holes that he had. And that guy changed. He despised women, but he used them. And then at the camp, he met the woman who became his wife. And he just become an extraordinary man. And this whole part of his life is like waters that have passed away. Because he was encountered by the God who loved him.
Yes.
God who rejected him and said, you sinner, sort it out.
I suspect that your answer to my next question is going to be similar. You write in your book, Craving for Love, while we hang on to our addictions, God cannot heal us. But my question is that if we're addicted to it, which implies a certain amount of out of controlness, how can we not hang on to them?
I think we have levels in us, and underneath the addictive urge can be a deeper thing which says, I hate this.
Yes.
And God reads the heart.
Yes.
And our deep heart says, I am trapped. And the lower part, another part of our heart says, yeah, but I like it. But then God looks at the deeper part of our heart and says, you are trapped. And I'm coming to the child who is trapped. I'm coming to the woman who is trapped, saying, I love you. You're caught in your addiction, but you are beautiful to me.
That's so beautiful. Another related issue is the addict's fear of being known for who they really are. Talk about that.
That's a tricky one, because when you've got a judgmental church around you, and I'm speaking in general terms, when you've got people who know how to be respectable, know how to put the religious facade on, they're not going to be people who are going to understand. They're going to be people who are going to judge you for revealing who you really are. Yeah, because they're not revealing who they really are. Yeah. So if you do, it's like you make them feel uncomfortable. You challenge them actually, and they can't help you because they can't understand you. Yeah. So finding a place where you can be yourself, I think, God can lead us into small groups of people where we can be ourselves. Yeah. The ex-gay, quote unquote, support group, or the gender affirming support groups, for example. You can go there.
Critical.
And open up about who you are, and no one's saying, oh, look at that. They're saying, yeah, I get that. I'm there too, yes. And so you're gathered around. So by and large, the church, unless it is a church that God is encountering and God is loving, it's hard to find a place to open up about who you are.
Yeah, I remember in my sexual addiction thinking, if anybody knew who I really am and what I really do, they couldn't possibly love me. And I don't want that rejection, so I'm going to hide it.
That's right.
So
That's
getting
right.
in that group that is trained to accept whatever someone comes in with,
Yeah.
I think is critical.
Yes. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, in your book, you talk about fallen masculinity and femininity and how our dysfunctional culture makes things even worse. Talk about that.
Oh my goodness, this is a huge subject. But we basically start with the concept of masculinity and femininity being in God himself. He made us in his image. He made us male and female, as we know. So men carry more of the masculine, women carry more of the feminine, but we have masculinity and femininity within us.
Yeah.
And when that gets out of balance within us, what might be an example? A woman who is not able to make decisions might be a woman who doesn't have a strongly developed masculine side. She's always had decisions made for her, so she becomes passive. She might even become manipulative and getting her way without stating what she's needing. So her masculine side needs strengthening. In lesbianism, we've got someone who has overdeveloped, if she's a woman, overdeveloped her masculine side. And we can do this because we've rejected the feminine side. The femininity has been, we've been told that being a mother, raising children, doing traditionally female things is not valuable, is not admired, is not impressive. So you reject the feminine side of yourself, much to your own harm, and you overdevelop your masculine side. If your father was sort of aggressive with your mother, then you might imitate your father's aggression. And so assertiveness aggression is a fallen form of assertiveness. But a woman, that woman needs to have a lesbian woman who's overdeveloped her masculinity is going to find she's got a hole in her feminine side. And she's going to, that's where the attraction comes from, because she's looking for the affirmation of a feminine side that she never received. She mightn't have got it from her mother. She mightn't have got it from her friends at school. She might have only had boys to play with. And so we get out of kilter. And God wants us to unify as he is one. Masculinity and femininity are in him. He wants us to be unified in ourselves, balanced. And you'll find that I'm having a senior moment here.
Well, let me ask you this. The boy who ends up effeminate, I guess that could be the fact that he never bonded with his dad or the masculine. And so he's identified with the feminine. Perhaps his environment is filled with women, and that's all he's surrounded by. So he could end up with an effeminacy without even wanting to.
That's exactly the sort of process that goes on, in fact. That's it isn't just the breakdown in the role modeling with his father or the necessary dependence on his father. It happens at school too. You know, if you haven't had your father build in confidence into you, and you'll tend to go into your peer groups afraid, timid, and the boys will tend to say, oh, you know, I go and play with the girls, you know, so you're not absorbing gender from your peer group either. And in a way, the peer group is even more important. Well, it's as important as the father bond in this sort of osmotic process by which we develop our sense of ourselves as a boy or a girl, and being happy with that.
Now you talk about in your book the things that are truly broken in the homosexual and sex addict and many other situations has nothing to do with the the symptom. It has to do with the cause, like inner vows and defensive detachment and fear of women and bullying. Talk about some of those hidden causes that need to be addressed in the healing process.
Oh. You talk to a man and who was gay, and sex was never what he was wanting. He'd always say it was things like companionship or belonging or value or friendship or camaraderie or strength or one thing leads to another. When you've got deficits, you can't go out and get the things you're needing because you don't even know what you need.
Talk about inner vows and how that derails us.
Inner vows, well, things we start to believe about ourselves, things we've been told maybe, and about ourselves. For example, my problem with the stammer, with the stutter, started because my mother, trying to slow my speech down because I was a very rapid speaker, said to me one day, you speak so fast that one day you're going to start to stutter and people will think you're a fool.
Oh, no.
Now, that wasn't an inner vow, but I heard something.
A lie.
Stuck. I heard a lie, and it had the force of a malediction.
Yeah.
And I was only about 9 or 10, and I was popular, I was outgoing, I was the class captain in my school. But all of a sudden, this voice in my head would say, you can't say that word. You can't say that word. You can't say M's. You can't say W's. And it grew from one thing that my mother had said, into this metamorphose into this octopus that just went into every part of my life and made speaking excruciating, so that I became withdrawn and silent, and in a great deal of pain. And I couldn't talk to my parents about it. They didn't want to know about it. And so, this became the root of the needs that I had for love, because no one was helping me, no one was supporting me, no one was understanding what was going on. I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
So we can. It wasn't an inner vow, but it was something that was said to me, a lie I believed. And I think in the world in which we lived, we are surrounded by lies. We are bombarded with stuff which is not true about God, about our lives, about who we are, about our futures, and these things hollow us out. And we start to try and make our own lives, and we find the crutches which are going to help us get through life, limping along. And because we are sexual creatures, our sexuality gets involved. So this is why I'm saying it's not about sex. It was never about sex. Originally, it's emotional. It's about needs for affirmation. Often with guys, it's father replacement. Often with women, it's mother replacement. But sex becomes the means by which we attempt to feel good about ourselves. If we are addictively, inordinately, emotionally connected to something that we are needing for ourselves, and we're getting it through another human being, it can become obsessive. And once that starts, you find that your sexuality gets involved. And that's, because you're sexual creatures. And that's the progression. It's about roots. It's about the way that they spread, incremental, one thing upon another. Not one single thing causes homosexuality or the things we get ourselves into. It's this, and then that person says that, and this person thinks that about me, and I heard that, and so I believe it about me too. And off it goes. I can't tell anybody. I can't tell my parents. I can't tell other people. I am alone. If I'm alone, I want to comfort myself or stimulate myself, and so off it goes.
You know, a good example of an inner vow that I had was in having a failure in a relationship with a girl in high school and being rejected. My inner vow was, I'm never going to risk loving again because it hurts too much. So that kind of thing can be an inner vow. And then there's defensive detachment.
Yeah.
And my example of that, and you give some wonderful examples in your book, my father was whipping me one day pretty severely, and I said inside of myself, you're not my father, and I'm not your son.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I was trying to defend myself from the pain of his rejection. And I made this vow inside of me that I was not going to be his son, and I detached myself from the source of the pain.
Yeah. That's what we do. And this is what I did with my own father. In the end, I sought his approval so much. I was a tomboy in my attempts to be like my brothers so I could get my father's attention. But it never came. And finally, finally, I made a decision somewhere or other. You don't want me, I don't want you either.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just became, I pushed this thing away from me, and I left home at 17 and I never went back. But all I did was just create this hole inside myself that was crying out to belong, to be in family. But God knew it, and God saw it, and he came and he rescued me.
Yeah, another example of that sort of thing is the boy who's got an abusive father who's beating up his mom every day. And he retreats into the closet to escape the fear of being beaten up himself. And his view of his dad is like, if that's what a man is like, I don't want to be one.
That's right.
So there's an example of a vow and a kind of a form of defensive detachment. I suppose bullying also creates the same sort of thing where you end up feeling like you're defective in some way, and you're not normal and unlovable.
Yes to all that. yes to all that. It's what we do, and none of us is immune from this. We might we have little and large addictions, and it doesn't matter what you're addicted to, it's what the addiction does for you. It makes you feel better. So it could be anything from chocolate to A passes to being a workaholic because you get your gratification from your bosses. Well done, you're good, we'll give you promotion status.
And if you're, say, looking at porn all the time, you're thinking, I'm stuck, I can't stop doing this, God must hate me, I'm wretched. And so the last person you're going to turn to is God, because you've drawn all these conclusions, these conclusions.
Yeah. He's the first one we should be turning to.
I'd like to say that one of the things we should declare is, broken or not, here I come, and just run and jump into his arms.
That is exactly right. I one day when I was talking to God and I was struggling about something or other, I saw myself running towards him. I had a furious limp in this vision I had. I was limping badly, but I was still running towards him because he's my rescuer. I mean, Jesus, the name means savior, the name means rescuer, and he, sometimes I used to say to God, you're a spirit and I'm human and I need a hug from you. And I longed for this hug from God, because how else would I know that he loved me? But I've had the encounters in which I have felt totally wrapped around. One in the last 6 months or so, I've had 2 experiences where I have felt totally encompassed by God, and one of them was he just sort of came up behind me and he just hugged me. It was totally out of the blue, And it was so strong. And the thing was, although he came up behind, it was full frontal.
Mm.
I was so close. He held me so close. And he said to me, Briar, there's nothing between.
Wow. And that's
Nothing
because of the
between.
righteousness of Christ and his sacrifice, where he took the penalty for what you see as wrong with you onto himself.
Yes. He sees the heart. He sees, I don't want the stuff that I'm involved in. I'm really wanting you. I can see that now.
Yeah. And it's the love that persuades us to say no to ungodliness. I remember having an experience where I was committing a sin, and God said to me, if you turn to me now, I will love you and forgive you and embrace you. And I thought, that can't be God. I'm in the middle of a sin here.
That's just what I want to hear, but it was him.
He goes out of the room when I sin. And I'm lucky if he comes back in. But so I just continued in the sin. And then after I was done, he says to me again with the same loving, embracing words and tone, if you turn to me right now, I will love you and forgive you and embrace you. And I thought, oh God, if that's what you're really like, I want to follow you. So I went from following him because I was supposed to following him because I wanted to.
That is the huge difference.
Yeah. And I got so much healing after that, because my whole perspective was just and I discovered who he was really like, as opposed to who I thought he was like.
I remember, I think I mentioned the story in Craving for Love. I was talking to a lesbian woman who was working her way out of lesbianism, and she was having a struggle, and she was sitting on the steps, and she lit up a fag, a cigarette, and then she sort of said, "Oh, I can't even stop smoking, I can't even stop smoking." And God said to her, she said, clear as a bell, she heard him say, "Give yourself a break."
It's wonderful. Well, we're running out of time, and I just wanted to close with a wonderful quote from your book. You write in Craving for Love, short-term relationships are intrinsic to the homosexual condition, though gays themselves seek to blame external factors. But Cy Rogers, who is a wonderful minister in this area who's since passed on, Cy Rogers says 9 of every 10 homosexuals who write to him actually want to change, not because of public rejection or even hostility, but because of an inner realization that what they are doing is not yielding the promised satisfaction. And so we really have to come to that place where we realize what I've got, what I'm doing just ain't the purpose of life. It's not bringing the fulfillment I need. Maybe I should try the loving arms of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking to Briar Whitehead from New Zealand. She is the author of Craving for Love. Go ahead and hold it up so that they can see the book cover. Tell them where they can find it.
Okay. Actually, David, while I'm holding it up, I'm looking at the back of it, and I think that some of the best reviews I've got on this book are from people who are former gays or former lesbians. So it's reached right through. Listen, when I became a Christian last year, this woman says, I didn't know, no one knew what I was talking about. Someone gave me Craving for Love. The pages are so worn, and every page has underlining and writing in the margin. You wouldn't believe I'd only had it for 3.5 months. At times I've cried through all the pages. She calls herself a strong, radical lesbian. And this former gay man here, Australia, the best book I've read on healing. It had me weeping as it read my soul and heart like a book. No book except the Bible has ever done that to me. So yes, where do you get it? Well, look, we're actually, it's online on my website, or the book's website, www.cravingforlove, all one word, .nz.
For New Zealand.
NZ for New Zealand. Yeah. And you can get it there. It's actually, you give away the love of God. You don't charge for it. So it's on the website in the form of a PDF, which you can download, an EPUB, It's also on Kindle. And if you do want the printed version, though, you're going to have to get it sent to you from New Zealand because, and I'm afraid the freight charges are rather high.
Yeah. So get it online if you don't want to pay those freight charges, which I know are outrageous.
Yeah.
Like $50 or something just to ship a $15 book. We've been talking to Briar Whitehead, and I just highly recommend her book. And the core truth that she comes out with in that book, that it is the love of Christ and experiencing that love that transforms us, no matter what your issue is, no matter what your addiction, bondage, self-hatred, whatever it is, it's experiencing the love of God that will transform you and bring healing and transformation.
Nothing else works. Nothing else works.
Yeah, it says in 2 Corinthians 3:18 that as we gaze upon the glory of the Lord, we are transformed into his image. So right there in the scriptures, you have what I just said. Thank you, Briar, for being with us. I've so enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure, Dave. Lovely to be talking to you again.
God bless.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Remember, much of Dr. Foster's teaching has been taken from his new book entitled Sexual Healing Reference Edition, available at our website, masteringlife.org. This podcast and our many other resources are available because of our donors. If you are one of them, thank you. If you would like to join in supporting us, please visit masteringlife.org.